Good evening and welcome to another exciting episode of Triple Tap Tuesday. Welcome here, Ken and Lance. How are you both this evening? Good to be here with you.
Ainsley, it's great to be here with you. G'day, Lancey. How are you, mate?
Yeah, awesome. Happy to be here. It's been a big day. I'm a bit tired today.
What have you been up to, Lance?
Oh, look, had a really good meeting today with some super cool tribal elders from another tribe we'll be working with, and
Awesome.
The stories just keep getting bigger and more incredible. So say goodbye to the voice, people.
Very, very exciting. Yeah, welcome everybody who's joined us. I'll come to you in a minute, Ken. Welcome everybody who's just joined us. If you haven't been following along what the Australia Project is doing, especially with the sovereign nations, then please do join us, and please go back and listen to some of our videos on our YouTube channel at Triple Tap or on our website to follow along, because it certainly is getting very, very exciting here at the Australia Project. How about you, Ken? How's your week been?
My week's been fantastic. I spent today talking with John Sultan, who we're working on a run across the widest part of Australia to raise awareness about a new business model that will bring health and nutrition to the people in Australia, and they'll be able to participate in that business model to bring cost-effective organic food to themselves, and everyone can participate in that model as it comes forwards. It's fantastic. And I found out today that we're going to be given 90 seconds per day of broadcast time during the Tour de France. Every day of the Tour de France, we're going to get free 90 seconds broadcast. That's amazing.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I've had a good weekend because, as you guys know, I celebrated another day of my born day. And you guys know that I love bees. And a couple of weeks ago, we interviewed Nikki Florio from the US. And I was really excited because I don't know if you probably can't see this on here because of my background, but there we go. I received some lovely little bee socks here from Save the Bees from bethecure.com.au, and I've got a t-shirt from these guys. So this is really cool. But what I wanted to share with you, because I only just picked this up like to show tonight, and I was reading the little business card that came with it, and it ties in perfectly with what we're going to be discussing tonight with our guests. It says here, bees and humanity face a major challenge from insecticides, herbicides, industrial scale, monoculture, food farming, and habitat fragmentation. So we need to tackle these issues together and, of course, save the bees. And so we've got some exciting people that we are chatting to tonight. It's not about saving bees, but we're going to be talking about ants tonight. Just let me share my screen again so that I can introduce these people to you, and then we can definitely get underway. So I hope you guys are all excited, and please do participate tonight, guys, in the chat. You'll be able to put your questions in the chat when we bring our guests on, and as you hear, you'll be able to ask questions which we can then ask them as we go along. So it's pretty exciting. We have Brett and Conny joining us from the Bonnah Community Ants. We'll get them on in just a second, but I just want to tell you a little bit about them before they join us. So the Bonnah Community Ants was set up to inform and enable the community to be active participants in the control and suppression of the invasive pest species fire ants. They look pretty nasty, don't they? They're not like those little black ants that we see. They look quite nasty. What they have since discovered is that their participation was not wanted by the program. They were only interested in compulsory baiting of the environment with 100% coverage mentality. And nowhere in the world has there been such a huge release of chemical insect growth regulators into the environment. And the release has been indiscriminate and against permit of use conditions. The community group has sent numerous letters to politicians and bureaucrat authorities with no acknowledgement that they believe the program is committing environmental harm, with the very real possibility that our natural pollinators will be affected by their continual mass insecticide program. So they are committed. Brett and Conny and the Bonnah Community Ants are committed to informing the communities of Australia about this program's operations, to hold them to account and force a change to environmentally safe control and suppression methods. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's bring on Conny and Brett, and let's have a chat with them about what they're doing in the community. Hi, Brett. Nice to see you.
Hey, how are you, Ainsley?
Yeah, good. Thank you there. Connie's there. Yeah, there we go. There's Conny. Hi, Conny. Hi. Lovely to meet you. So, guys, tell us a little bit more, apart from that very brief introduction on the Boonah community. I read only a little bit about this, and the article that I read was at least a decade ago, and the government's obviously spent something ridiculous figure like $250 million. And I know that we were having a chat about this before. It's probably way, way, way more than that. And it's been an absolutely failed program. So why don't you guys tell us what you've been doing and how it's going?
Brett,
Well,
maybe you can give us, yeah.
I'll go first. Well, look, the program, the fire ants were discovered in 2001 out at Oxley and also the Brisbane Port Authority. They were estimated to be here for 10 years prior to that discovery time. Since then, the Labor government, Henry Palaszczuk, in fact, Anastasia's father, was in charge of the fisheries department, the agriculture fisheries, and he basically just set up a juggernaut for employing people. He went against the science. He didn't do what the science had suggested, and basically it was just a big employment program for the unemployed. Many unemployed, they wouldn't get their dole if they didn't go to work. So obviously when they went to work, they weren't really interested in fighting the fire ants. They were just interested in getting their dole. So since then, they've managed to get into aerial baiting, remote sensing, and everything has failed. As I said before, it's gone from 40,000 hectares to 650,000 hectares and growing. They just keep getting money from the federal government. It's a national program. So basically the federal government puts in 50% and each state puts in a percentage of the funding as well. So we're spending Victorians' money, we're spending Tasmania's money. And yes, it's just become this huge money spinner for the Queensland Treasury and the Agricultural Department.
Did he have any positive effect on this, Brett and Conny? Did Henry Palaszczuk have any skill, and did he do any good work in this whatsoever?
No, the answer is no. The only thing he did was employed the unemployed, and it looked good on the balance sheet for employment. That was his, and nothing affected the program or the spread of the ants. It was basically just a political gain of employment of unemployed.
How many people are involved, Brett, in the program? Or roughly?
How many?
Yeah, roughly how many people are they employing on this program? Like, how big is the program?
Oh, it's huge. I couldn't give you a figure. It's huge. They've got, like, just around Boonah alone, we've got, like, say 30 or 40 vehicles running around with these people in it that go onto properties and spread the bait. We see them in the parks. They all have their smokos in the parks, all different places. So it's very hard to estimate. Well, I've got information from their programs and everything, but to put it all together and make sense of it is very difficult. There is just so much information, as you can imagine, from 2001 to now, 22, 23 years. They've done so many reports, so many reviews, and nothing has ever changed. And they don't, as Kent said before, they don't actually issue any results. They don't tell us how the eradication is going. All we know is it's spreading and it's getting larger and larger by the day.
So they're not
But
actually reducing. They're not actually reducing the fire ants at all. And how big is the
No.
problem of the fire ants? How big a problem is it?
Well, they've spread to Victoria now. Okay, I was just looking up some results from Dr. Pam Swepson. She's quite qualified in this, but guess what? Now she's calling for a royal commission, and
then
we know how effective that will be. Go ahead, Connie.
well, it should be. I mean, I only joined in 2021, early 2021, when we moved to a property and the helicopter flew over. And I mean, the whole program is geared at, they're not telling us the truth. They're working against the permit. So the first thing I phoned them up and said, I didn't know that the helicopter was actually spraying. There was no pamphlets or anything. And I was then told later on that this was the fire, and people said, what do you mean? What are they doing? And then I phoned them up and I said, well, I wasn't contacted. And they said, oh, we rang you and we assumed that because you didn't ring back, means you give consent. And I said, no, I did not get consent. So they're supposed to be in contact with the people. So especially with the helicopter spraying, because you obviously can't spray everywhere. So I managed to take my property off the helicopter spraying. And then I looked closer in what they're actually spraying over that year. And in my area, because I'm near the creek, they're spraying as mesoprene. So I looked up the permit for that with the APVMA, and it's quite clearly on that permit that do not spray if there's no fire ants or if there's no residual any longer. And I sort of confronted them and said, you can't spray. There is no fire ants on my place. I have a place where we walk regularly and we have never seen fire ants. You must not forget that these fire ants are supposed to be really aggressive. So if you step anywhere near the nest, they will attack you, because that's why we want to get rid of them, because they are so, and they have a quite bad sting. So you would notice when you have fire ants on your place. So yeah, they basically said, oh, we're interpreting this because we don't know if you have fire ants on your place, therefore we can spray. So I went to the APVMA and told them about that, and they said, oh, no, definitely not. And they were going to investigate that. So the permit also says you cannot spray if into the creek. Well, I actually filmed them going up and down the creek. And then you're not supposed to be spraying when there is bad weather forecast like storms. They also do that. So they're not at all abiding by the permits, which is pretty bad, because if I would have a permit from APVMA, which is the Australian, for people that don't know that, it's the Australian Pesticide and Veterinary Medicine Authority. And if I have a permit and I do anything against that permit, I would get my permit revoked instantly. But they now have been doing this for quite some time. And I basically said to them, you're going against your permit. And they sent me leaflets and basically threatening that they come on my property. And it said on the leaflets, we're going to spray because there could be fire ants on your. So they have no intention. It's not like by accident they didn't know what they were doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They have no intention to going against the permits.
Is there a safe way to get rid of the fire ants? Is there a safe way to do that?
Well,
Yeah, there is.
Please elaborate.
There is.
Go ahead.
There is. What it is you actually find the ants. It's not rocket science. There's no mystery or magical to this at all. It's you need to find the nest with the queen and you take the queen out. If you do not take the queen out, that nest will just come back larger and bigger than ever. So, and it's not, it doesn't have to be with a chemical. You can kill these things with boiling water. They don't like heat, so they pour boiling water down into the nest, and if you manage to get it to the queen, it'll kill her straight away. That nest will not continue after the queen is killed. So this is the problem with the whole program. They don't care where the ants are, but all these baits are designed as a controlling bait, not a preventative bait. They're using it as a preventative measure. It's a controlling bait. And if you do not have foraging fire ants, the bait will sit on the ground, be absorbed into the soil, affect your soil, affect other insects without ever even touching an ant. So this is the gross negligence of this program. It's huge. You just can't fathom what they're doing.
What can be done, Brett?
Well, what has to be done is they need to create, well, they have scent trained animals that can find the nests. They only use them for specific purposes, and I've questioned them about it, and they said, oh, the dogs don't like it when it's hot because they have to, they get hot easily, so they can only work for a short period of time. They have remote sensing. They fly helicopters over and they're looking for the heat patches on the ground, because the ants obviously create heat by their movement, but that is very unsuccessful. They found like maybe 30% of all detections are either a hot fence post, piece of tin in the ground, hot cow dung. It's just very, very erratic, and it's not a positive way to find. So they need to actually get people on the ground, and they need to be looking for the nests. They need to be concentrating on the areas where these ants will proliferate, which is in open, disturbed ground. As I said, this is not rocket science. These ants have been around for a long time, and they love certain conditions. So you can narrow down your attack on where these ants are by following those things that the ants like. They love disturbed ground. They love water, so they'll fly towards water. So they need water to survive. So it just boils down to them actually doing this. You can put out traps. You can put out like sentinel traps with bait in it, like a saveloy. They love fatty, high carbohydrate foods like vegetable oils and so forth. You can put those traps out and monitor those traps. And if you see ants in them, well, you know you've got fire ants, then you can put the bait down accordingly, and the ants will then take it back to the queen. As I said before, the only way this bait works is if it's taken back to the queen. It will not work just by sitting on the ground. And that's what they're doing. And they call this a world first. They call this program a world first. And you know why they call it a world first? Because no one has ever contemplated eradicating ants from 650,000 hectares. It's just not in anyone's belief that someone could suggest that we're going to do it. But our Queensland government is saying we can do it. Now, there's the other catch here, because if they said we're only going to control and suppress these ants, they wouldn't get the funding from the federal government. The only reason they're getting the funding from the federal government because they're telling them we can eradicate them. Eradicate is the word.
What sort of
If you
funding
take
do
that
they get, Brett?
eradicate out, the money stops.
What
And there's
sort of
no
money?
chance.
What sort of money are we talking about?
Well, we're talking 800 million.
Plus,
We're talking like $50 million a year going for 10 years.
Ainsley, what I'm seeing around my place, and you know I live in the Scenic Rim, is I see helicopters flying around backwards and forwards, sweeping over the ranges and the mountains and the farmland. And I see them drop the soybeans that's impregnated with this growth hormone. And what this growth hormone is supposed to do, it's supposed to stop the queen from being able to breed. And I've no doubt that it will do that if it happens, as Brett says, if that is taken back to the queen and fed to her, and it will kill her and it will stop them from breeding. But the problem is it's killing all the other insects. All the birds are beginning to eat that rely on those insects for their food source, are ingesting that, then their breeding rate goes down. We've had bird kills all over the Scenic Rim. We've got farmers who are picking up, 4 potato bags, 10 potato bags, 11, 15 potato bags of dead birds of all sorts of species, woolly wagtails, plovers, frogmouth owls.
No.
Yeah, because they eat these small mammals that are you know, and look at the galahs. The galahs will see this grain laying on the ground. They will fly down in entire flocks and fill their bellies with this stuff freshly after the helicopters have dropped it. It's
Oh, shame.
so irresponsible.
Yeah, we have a question from one of our listeners already. Is it likely that there's a systematic failure of border controls in inspection, detection, and reporting in a timely manner?
Definitely, yes. That's the reason that the spread is there, because the carrier articles like mulch, dirts, get in pot plants are getting transported everywhere. Now there's 2 zones they've set up, biosecurity zone 1 and 2, I think it is, and they're meant to monitor the stuff going from one to the other. But the huge size of this, it's just not possible to monitor these 2 zones. It's just not possible. The size of this infestation is so great that they're not able to control it. So yes, the border controls have fallen right down. It's non-existent.
Are fire ants a problem in other countries?
Oh yes, America has had them since 1930. They tried everything. In the 60s, they actually brought the old bombers from World War II out, and they sprayed large areas with heavy poisonous mist insecticide. I couldn't tell you the name of it, but anyway, the old Americans, they did it. They killed off everything, all the native ants, except the fire ant. And they popped their head up and went, hang on, we've got this whole thing for ourselves.
They basically stated from America, the research that's coming out, that there's no way you can kill them with insecticides. This is not working. So what they're going now is they're going actually with a beetle that is laying eggs in the heads of the fire ants, and they're claiming success with that. But they're basically saying the spraying is not working. It's actually
Conny, I remember the Australian government claiming success with a toad once to kill a cane beetle.
yeah.
What about fire? Will fire kill them? Burning them out, burning the nests.
Yeah, burning the nest. Yeah, well, it's not. I suppose not environmentally friendly, but I would contemplate putting petrol down the nest and burning it. But it's not. It's a bit frowned upon, that method.
Listen, if you tell Anastasia Palaszczuk that you can get money for setting Queensland on fire, I don't think that's a wise decision, okay, to tell her that. I'm just putting that out there, guys. I don't think it's a wise decision to tell Anastasia you can make money from setting Queensland on fire.
Is it mainly a problem in Queensland, or is it right across the East Coast? Or is it right across Australia? I've not heard of them in WA, that's all.
No, it's basically just the southeast Queensland corner. It's very strange that they haven't got past Caboolture, because you look at their map, the propaganda that's on the Queensland fisheries website, or this biosecurity, the ant website, there's no ants past Caboolture. Now these things, they if the nest is doing really well, they'll send out elates, which are fertile females and males. They mate in the air and they can fly 5 k's. So the male dies off, the female snaps the wings off, and she'll find a little hole, and she wants to lay about 18 eggs. That's enough for her to start a nest. So it's very strange that they're not past Caboolture, because these things are prolific in the way they can spread. Wow. So, and like Kent said, they have been found in Victoria, according to Pam Swepson. We have to acknowledge Pam Swepson here, because she is a real fighter in that. And I recommend anyone to go to her website and look at the writings that she has there, because they're very extensive. She was an ex-employee of the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. She's a whistleblower, and she brought to the attention of the CJC, or whatever it's called. And anyway, they did a bit of a investigation and came and said, no, there's nothing to worry about. Everything's going fine. The problem was people were ringing in and saying, I've got a nest, and it would take months or even 6 months before they would get to those nests and actually treat them. So there was definitely mismanagement in the early days on this program that has left us in this position now. And it's like everything with government. Now we're in damage control. And in the last report, now they claim that they've got the best scientists in Australia working on this. And their method is called brute force.
Brute force.
Brute force. So that's the method they're using at the moment, brute force, in the hope that they're going to put some of that bait on the ground somewhere, possibly, maybe, where these fire ants are. And if we do it everywhere, we might just be able to do it.
Now,
Even,
if those
even though
fire
that flies in the face of good science and it's not worked anywhere else. So they've, you know, this is how the government operates. Look, the government's never successfully delivered anything except for confusion, chaos, and high taxes. That's what they can deliver successfully. Yep. This is how much of a problem is it? How many fire ants are there in your area?
Well, they're mainly in the Logan area, Springfield. They're out at the Lockyer Valley. They are extensive. It is a problem.
According to Dr. Pam Swetson's site, 65,000 colonies were detected in 2001. I know they've dropped a little bit since then, but 65,000 colonies.
But the zone is all of Brisbane as well. They have two zones.
Yeah,
one is all of Brisbane.
Yeah.
What are the sort of problems that what are the problems that we might face because of those colonies of fire ants? What are the problems that we will face?
Well, the problem is that they have a very bad sting and they're very aggressive. So, and they could attack animals. And they definitely could harm humans. The sting apparently gives you big hives, and it could harm our agriculture.
Yeah. The other thing is that they're very insatiable eaters. They just eat. They consume. So they'll pick crops. They'll eat crops. They'll eat the sack out of the corn. There's a little bit of high value protein or carbohydrate it is in the corn. They'll actually just eat that sack out. So, and they'll eat crops. So that's what the concern is with the government, is that it's going to affect the agricultural industry on the food production side.
Unlike their poisoning, which is killing all the birds and insects in the whole biosphere.
It is in a sense affecting us as well, because especially with they have two growth growth regulators, that they're spraying, and one of them is pyriproxyfen, and that stays in the plants. So if you eat plants, you're gonna ingest that as well, and it's going to affect us. They have had studies where they've seen it in the milk of cows. So even the animals that are grazing, if it goes on the grazing, it's in the milk of the cows. It's actually been detected in the tissue. So in a sense, we will eventually eat that as well. And we're trying to get away from spraying everything with pesticides and insecticides. And here we go, we're doing it again, and under the banner of fire ants, and which we shouldn't. And like, for example, it is against their permit. They're not supposed to spray this as mesocream, and they're not supposed to spray it into the waterways, yet they're doing it. They're not supposed to spray it when rain is forecast, yet they're doing it. And the APVMA, if you complain to them, which I have done, I have complained to everybody I could possibly think of, they're investigating this. But where this is going to lead, I have no idea. I mean, the last time, they're even telling lies. They're telling us this S-mesocream the ground crew told me, no, this is registered, this is fine with organic farms, which it isn't. You have to, there's a withholding periods of 3 weeks before you can release anything after the spraying as organic again. The farmers are not being told that. And what I found out then too is that it used to be 12 months, the withholding period, but they had negotiations and now it's 3 weeks. I mean, did that all of a sudden become less toxic because they had negotiations? I am not quite sure what's going on there. It's very, it's very weird and wonderful.
I was reading on Dr. Swepson's website in regard to this, and she said the extent of the fire ant infestation in Queensland has been covered up so much, and that's to stop the federal government from pulling the funding that they're getting.
Yep.
I
That's,
think
that's right. It's as I said, it's a juggernaut. It's a money spinner for the Queensland Treasury and the Agriculture and Fishery Department, and each minister that's taken the role on since 2001 has just perpetuated the same thing. It's like a cartel, if you like, and they keep telling the steering committee in it, the federal government, yes, we can eradicate them. Yes, we can eradicate them. We'll tell you whatever you want to hear. Just give us the money. And that's what they're doing. There's no checks and balances. They're not achieving any goals. It just keeps perpetuating. And like they've got a 10-year program. So I think that started in 2017. So we're looking at 2027. This will continue on.
Yeah. Well, in the US, from 2011 in the US, they were already saying that it was a $1.2 billion problem in the US, and people were dying each year from these stings of these fire ants. Do you guys know if there's been any deaths in Australia from the fire ants?
I don't think so. I don't think there's been any deaths. I think there might have been some people admitted to hospital and had to have an EpiPen, but it, you know, like that is the fear factor. They've created this fear factor with them. It's the same with bees. Bees kill people every year too. If you happen to be allergic to the sting of a bee, well, you can die if you don't have your EpiPen with you. So basically what they've created is a fear factor, and everyone's fearful of these ants, whereas they're not to be feared. Well, obviously we fear them because they do have a bad sting, and if you're allergic to them, you need to be very careful so you don't end up dead. But we need to approach this in a logical and a common sense way. And if we do that, we can control and suppress. Eradication's gone, forget about it. Eradication, in my opinion, is over. And if you look at Pam, she says the same thing. We need to do a control and suppress. And that's what we've been asking of the government. And all we get is arrogance back. We get regurgitated propaganda. But the fear factor is what everyone is adhering to, just like the other thing that's happened. I won't mention that, but we all know they created a lot of fear, and then people folded and did things that they probably thought or shouldn't have done. So it's the same scenario as what they're doing now.
So if I can ask you this question, what country did they originate from?
South America.
How do they manage them there?
Well, they have natural predators in South America that eat the ants. So they are basically living in an ecosystem, then they are controlled by their predators. We have no predators. We have sharks, we have alligators, snakes, but nothing that will get on top of a fire ant. Our native ants will take out a newly mated queen before she actually establishes her full nest. That's our first line of defense, and that's why it's most important that we don't affect them. Whereas in their brute force, is it brute force? In their brute force method, they don't count.
They're killing everything.
They're killing everything.
So obviously you guys are lobbying to some degree the government for information and a common sense approach to this. The government tends to be very blinkered in what they do because they rely on their own experts. Is it a matter of you find the solution and take it to someone with a few more brains that may be able to have better influence over the government.
Yes, that's where we're headed next. We've only really dealt with the state side of things everywhere in our state. I haven't personally gone federally, but that's the next step, is to go federally, and there hopefully we get a more bipartisan sort of view of what's going on. At the moment, the steering committee is just listening to the Queensland government, and obviously they're just feeding them what they need to get the money. So yes, it's a very real possibility that we need to go and find someone who will actually put some common sense into the situation. I'm not sure that I'm going to find that, and I've lost a bit of hope, because there's definitely no hope in the state arena. So we just got to keep working on it, and hopefully we'll hit the right person. But the biggest thing is they need to start finding the nest. They need to stop indiscriminate baiting with a controlling bait in a preventative measure, and they need to start finding these ants and killing the nests to be productive in the actual.
Now, finding the nests, because you never hear about anything about fire ants anymore in the media. Is this something that they should be running an education campaign for people to go out and actively try and locate nests?
Yes, they do that. I've just got a brochure today in the mail. You get all these lovely, very high quality brochures. And in that it says, fire ants have other plans for your yard. Check your property now. Now, that's good and dandy, but people don't understand where they could be or what they look like, because these nests aren't conventional nests. They don't have an actual entry point and an exit point in the mound, the nest itself. They have tunnels that move out from the sides of the nest, and they access the nest through external points. So the nest itself is actually blind, and it will actually be just sitting on the ground. It's not actually a mound. They do mound, but only in the colder months, because, as I said, these guys are flawed. They're not perfect. They're almost perfect, but they're flawed. They cannot regulate their body temperature. So they need to find an area where they can manipulate their temperature, regulate their temperature by either moving up into the top of the nest or down into the bottom. So they like open areas with full sun. So if it gets too hot, they go down. If it gets too cold, they come up, and they therefore need the sun on the top of the nest. That's why their surveillance and their remote sensing is most active in the cooler months, is because these ants are coming out and building a heat for them. So yeah, that's so these pamphlets that they put out, it's just not good enough. They need to get whole communities together. They need to have education nights. They need to show people the ants. They need to show people the nests. And that's what we did as Boonah Community Ants. We actually beat them to it. And they've got millions and millions of dollars provided to them from the federal government and all the other states to do this sort of thing. And they haven't been doing it. They actually did a secret meeting in Boonah because of us, because we were putting so much pressure on the program and asking so many questions. They actually went behind our back and had a meeting with Landcare in our local arts centre to try and work out how they were going to turn us around and just take the bait and accept that this is the way it has to be. And I said to one guy, I said, well, okay, well, he wanted to come to my property and talk to me about it. And I said, okay, yeah, that'll be fine, but I don't think it's going to happen. How about I set up another community meeting and you come along and tell me why your method is the only method that's going to work and why you're not listening to us. Never heard from him again. And in fact, I found out today, because I had another call from an operative within this national program wanting to talk to me, wanting to not convince me. He was quite amicable, but he wants to know where I stand, because they're very concerned that we're not allowing. Well, I allowed them on the property, but they didn't want to come and do a surveillance. They wanted to bait. I said, I'll let you on the property. You find the ants, you can bait them, because then you can actually do what you're saying, you're treating something. You see, the thing today, we don't actually listen to the words that are spoken to us, and words mean a lot, and we've lost our way of comprehending. So they're saying to you, okay, I'm going to come on your property and treat you for fire ants. Okay, well, if you're going to treat me for fire ants, where are the fire ants? You know what I'm saying? So it's a contradiction of terms to say that we need to treat your property, and that they come and say, well, you won't know you've got them. Why won't you know? Oh, because these things just can't be seen. Well, it's not like that. They're ants. They need to be fed. They don't get fed underground. They got to come out. So if you have a food source, or you have something that they like, they'll be into it. There's no doubt about it. If there's an old carcass, like we live out an hour and a half from Brisbane, so we've got a bush environment. So roadkill, if there's a roadkill on the side of the road, if you upturn the carcass and you got fire ants, well, they'll be under there eating it. So these are the things that everyone could be doing, and that's what I wanted with this community ants, to make everyone aware of this, so we could actually help the program. But as in the bio, they weren't interested. All they want is this arrogance of this is how we're doing it. What you say doesn't matter, and this is what's going to happen to you. And even if you don't want us to treat your property, we're going to do it anyway. And that's their attitude.
Yeah, there's a name for that sort of behavior, and educated people call it communism.
Yeah.
They don't consult the people. They don't respect the power and the authority that the people have and hold. So it leads us to this situation. Then they go to the local land care group, which is all the secret handshake club, right? And they say, oh, now we've got a problem with all these people because now they're pushing back against fire ants. It's a manifestation of a bigger problem. It's systemic failure of government. That's why we've got fire ants here in the first place, because our ports, our border security is useless. We live on an island. The ants can't swim here.
How'd they get here?
So it was a failure to inspect and investigate and identify a very, very, very long time ago. So maybe you're right. Hopefully one day there'll be a biological control or a science control. You know, maybe they can re-engineer these things with nanotechnology and make them into little bombs, and they'll all go and visit the bloody politicians. We could reprogram them, control them with 5G towers. Maybe that's the answer.
Could be. Yeah, that could heat them up and yeah, cause a problem for sure.
Hey, I'll tell you something that I think is interesting. First of all, I used to think that fire ants had good taste because out of all of Australia, they came to southeast Queensland, and particularly the Scenic Rim. And as everyone knows in the world, southeast Queensland and the Scenic Rim is the most beautiful part of the world, right? So that's what I'm saying anyway. But now there's a group of fire ants that have turned up in Victoria. Now, I would suggest these Victorian fire ants have no taste whatsoever because they've turned up in Victoria, but also Dan Andrews runs Victoria. Now, since there's so much money being spent on fire ants, I wonder if Dan Andrews has worked out, hey, hang on a second, I can get in on this action.
Well,
now, go ahead.
Conny, you want to say something to that?
I mean, seriously, how did they get? How did they get from Queensland to Victoria? Hey, now obviously it's not our ants. Obviously they brought them in from somewhere else. Okay, so
Well, you know, transport.
They've had to come on a transport. Now, since the rest of Australia knows that they're coming on a transport, well, you know, why aren't the measures being spent on stopping? Because I've looked into this. There's no penalty for transporting fire ants that I've been able to locate. Is that the case? Is there a penalty for transporting fire ants?
No, Ken. I do believe there is a penalty.
Oh, there is a penalty now. Okay,
You got to be caught though, and they have to grab you, and that would take a mammoth effort for cars or operatives to be driving around, seeing someone with a wheelbarrow of dirt, a trailer of dirt, and stop them and inspect them for fire ants. You'd have to have roadblocks everywhere and checking.
We'd have to educate our people.
Day.
We'd have to educate our people to look for fire ants in the first place, and they're not doing that.
No, they're not doing that because that would actually probably take a bit of the control away from them. So yeah, like I said, they talk about using the community, and if you look at their reports, most of the nests have been located or given to them from public, the public finding them.
And they said on their website that if the public do find a nest and don't report it, they can be fined for not reporting it.
Exactly. We have a GBO, they call it a general biosecurity obligation, and everyone has it. So if you find a fire ant, well, you're supposed to let them know, otherwise you can get fined.
Maybe
Look,
there's another question. Go ahead, Ken.
I think that's just being, showing your community responsibility, your community spirit. Like if I think no one wants these fire ants, I don't want these fire ants. I know that Connie and you, Brett, don't want these fire ants. We'd love to get rid of them.
Yeah, we would help. Well, that's not the issue. The issue is that the methods they're using are affecting our environment very negatively. And I mean, you talked before about science, and they have the top scientists. Well, I actually rang them, and the scientists they employ to do this. She used to work in the biosecurity laboratory before. She had the same sort of like knowledge about fire ants as me when I started off looking into it. So I'm not quite sure where these top scientists come from. And then when I looked, it's basically the toxin or the growth generator, growth regulator they're using. I mean, it's all in the literature how bad this is, but they're going from, oh no, it's all safe because we looked at the mosquito, because mesoprene was used for a mosquito, and we are going by these studies. But it has never been used on such big a scale. It's been used in water, and it's been used at less concentrated. So you can't use these studies. And enough studies, I mean, I didn't have to look very long to find studies how bad this is for the environment. And especially the pyriproxyfen, it's widely used on arthropods. There's 80% of the animals are arthropods, which are all the insects, the spiders, the mites, and the millipedes. And these are all insects and animals that are eaten by birds, that are the food source of birds, small mammals, and frogs. I mean, and they will have more. They eat these insects that are affected by the growth generator, regulator, and they get more in them. So you higher up the food chain, the more of the toxin you're actually getting in because you're eating the small insects. And so there's no wonder that there's an effect on birds. And when they sprayed at our place, we had a heap of green frogs. None of them were seen after the spraying anymore, and we found a lot of dead ones. So frogs are normally the indicator that the environment is not healthy.
Got a question from one of our listeners. Has there been any consultation with the beekeepers industry to determine if there is any parallels in dealing with the exotic Asian honeybees? Not quite sure what they're getting at that question, but maybe there was a way that they dealt with them. If there's any correlation to what you guys can do with the fire ants.
Well, I don't know whether the people know, but currently in northern New South Wales, there's a varroa mite outbreak, and the government down there is going around and wiping out and killing whole nests of bees, whole hives. They open the hive, they put a damp cloth, they put a cloth in the top, they pour 250 mils of petrol on it, and then close the lid. And the fumes from the petrol kill the whole hive, the queen, all the bees, everything, even though there's no varroa mite in the nest. So again, they're actually killing these bees, even though there's no infestation of the pest in that hive. These what really brought my attention to the problem was they're dumping this in our trees. They're not just putting it in our paddocks, they're dumping it in our forests. And obviously it's like the cane toad. They brought a beetle over that lived in the top of the tree for the cane toad. Sorry, so they brought the cane toad over for a beetle that lived at the top of the tree, and it lived on the ground. So they're dropping these baits and they're landing in the trees. And I know they're landing in the trees, they're not getting to the ground. So that's where our flowers and our pollen is, and that's where the bees go. So anything that falls into those flowers and the bees will take it back to the hive. It's either going to be in your honey, you'll eat the pyroproxyphene, or it will then affect the hive. The hive will be less virulent and it will slowly dwindle, just like a fire ant's nest will. And it's very real. It does affect the bees. So, you know,
But they will tell you it doesn't affect the bees. And that's the problem. They will tell you it doesn't affect the other ants, even though there are studies out there that affects the native ants. It doesn't affect all the others. It seems to be, I mean, this is a broad
It's
spectrum.
a miracle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's great. You can eat it. They tell you it's so good.
Please use this poison. It's safe and effective.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how they come to this. I mean, it's a broad spectrum growth generator. It's not meant for just one ant species or for one insect species. They use it everywhere. So how can they come out with statements like that? How can they come out with lies like that? It's basically lies. And I mean, there's been studies done that they done it with 5 native ant species, and they were all affected. And the study concluded, oh, maybe we should get rid of them as well. So it's probably not as bad. I mean, it's out there in the literature if you really look.
Yeah.
That's what they're not doing. They're not really looking. They don't want to look.
Brett, Connie, how can people get involved with this in the community, or what can they do in their areas to assist?
Well, basically, create awareness what is actually going on. I was talking to a scientist the other day, and I said, "Oh, I'm fighting against fire ants because they're spraying it everywhere." And he just gasped and said, "Oh no, not really." And I said, "Yes, that's what's happening." And people are not aware how much is actually sprayed and what huge, what an enormous area they're spraying, and they're basically spraying everything. If you go with a helicopter over everything, I mean, there has to be an effect. I don't know even how you can say there's no effect on the environment.
Yeah. Does the Boonah, does your Boonah community ants group, do you put out like flyers or education material that perhaps people in our community all around Australia can share with their communities? Do you guys do anything like that?
We don't. We've only got our email address for people that want information. Through our email address, they can email, and then we provide information. But we do have a Facebook site called FACT, F-A-C-T. Yeah, there it is there, FACT. Fire Ant Community Talk Fact, Scenic Rim.
Yeah, it's in the chat, guys, if anyone's listening.
So that's where everyone talks about it now. It's a private group, so you have to sort of ask to join. But we've had infiltrations there too. We've had fire ant people join, so we were a little bit coy on who we let in. But at the end of the day, we can't stop that. So we try and keep that simple. But yeah, if anyone's got a concern, you can hit that fact group, and then we will reply through there as best we can. So the main thing is that people don't accept what they're doing and push back. That's all we ask of everyone, because if you allow them to bait indiscriminately without knowing you got fire, you are actually complicit in breaking the law. When I say breaking the law, in not going with the permit conditions. So you've got to realize if you let someone bait your property and they can't show you the fire ants, you are actually complicit in this. You are part of the problem. Now I've got a fella down the road. He owned this whole hill, His family did, and he sold it off over the years. Anyway, he's a very active person. He's against the government. Well, I shouldn't say that. He's not against the government, but he fights them on their poor management of other areas. And we got together, we talked about it, and in the end, he just let them bait his property. And I said, you let them bait your property? I said, you got any fire ants? He went, no. And I said, well, why did you let them bait your property? Oh, no one is brave enough to say no. When I say no one, there's a small percentage of us who are prepared to hold the line, and that's what we will do. And what we ask of other people is to do the same. And if everyone did it, we would make a real dent, and they would have to look at it, because they wouldn't be able to facilitate the mass insecticiding of our environment.
The fact
It's a
is,
sad
there's
situation, isn't it? It's a really sad situation.
It is a very sad situation, and the fact is, our government could they could take a leading role in this, in helping to educate the community. We could band together, and we could be educated. We could take the action necessary on our own land to help defend this environment. Look, Australians love to protect the environment. I strongly suspect that's why there's no media about this. They drop pamphlets, but they only drop pamphlets in the areas where they want to spray next.
That's right.
And anecdotally, I can tell you this: I have seen the fire ant crews out there, and the number one job that they do is get together, and I watch them week after week after week inside my area where I live, turn up at the local park for an hour-and-a-half long lunch.
There's a strategy to that, though, Kent. If they're not feeding the ants, they'll get hungry and they'll come out. That's their strategy. See,
that's the strategy.
Highly organised government agents. You're talking about the cream of the crop there in that park, mate, for an hour and a half, Smoko.
An
That's
hour and a half. Yeah.
Yeah,
Keep
but
going,
I
Conny.
think that there's a real issue in the sense that they're not abiding by their permits. I mean, this is the government. They should go with example and being really applying with their permit, but now they're not. And we have seen the negotiation this department or this group does. And they get sort of like the withholding period from 12 months to 3 weeks down. But now we have a new head of the biosecurity, Rachel Tay, and she is a former employee with the APVMA. And she sent me a letter and said that they will negotiate with the people with the APVMA with the permit. That's very scary. So does that mean that they will just change the permit so they can further spray? I mean,
Of course, they'll change the permits, because if the law is against what the government wants to do, they just change the law, because morally that's the correct thing to do, isn't it?
and I mean, I complained to the Department of Environment, and they basically said, oh no, we can't do anything. It's not beyond repair, damage beyond repair. And well, if it's damage beyond repair, that's a bit late to do something. But that's their attitude. Let's get it damaged beyond repair, and then we step in and come out with, I don't know.
Guys,
Where's the money? Where's the money going?
We are almost out of time. Can I just ask you what, apart from where is the money going, what impact is this going to have on our environment if we don't get this under control?
More two-headed people.
Well, it in the end will affect us too. I mean, it's going to affect the environment. There's residue in the plants. There's residue in the animals that eat this. It's going to affect our environments. I mean, we have echidnas that eat ants. We're destroying all the ant species. It has to have an effect on the environment, on our natural species, and we're supposed to protect them. They're supposed to be protected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the solution is quite easy, and they need to spread this wealth instead of concentrating it into a few greedy hands. Make the discovery of the nests a valuable find, because any species that's worth a lot of money is endangered on this planet. That's the rule. So what you've got to do is say, okay, there's an economic point which will drive people to go out and locate these nests and then destroy them. That's the way to eradicate it. Now, it might take 20 years, but that's the best chance we've got, because greed will drive the discovery of these nests and eradicate this problem.
Mm, mm.
Yep.
All
Now,
right,
how
guys,
long have we got, Ainsley?
We're
How
out of
long have
time.
we got?
No, we're out of time, guys. So we
Okay.
are going to have to wrap it up. But I would like to ask you if you've got any last comments that you'd like to leave with our listeners today. Certainly been interesting and insightful discussions, and perhaps a conversation that we will need to continue for another day.
Yeah, for sure. All I ask of people is to participate, motivate, and yeah, just stand, hold the line, and don't accept everything that you hear from the government, and don't fear anything. That's all I can say.
Nice wise words there, Brett. What about you, Connie?
Yeah, basically get involved and protect our environment. Don't just stand there and expect the government to do it, because they won't.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you, Kent. Thank you, Lance, for joining me and for all those insightful questions. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Connie, for your time and for the work you're doing to help with the situation that's happening there. And thank you to all our listeners for being here and tuning into these conversations. You can see there are certainly issues around our country that definitely need attending to, and our government's being held to account. So thanks, everyone, for being here. And we'll see you same time next place on Triple Tap. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Right, everyone.
Bye.